Good morning, everyone, and welcome. We'll be waiting just a few minutes past the hour to get started, just to give everyone a chance to connect. Thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us today and being part of our community. We have some great content planned, but before we get started, I'd just like to go over some housekeeping items. Feel free to ask questions at any time by typing in the IM window. Be aware that anything you post will be publicly visible. If you prefer, you can post your questions anonymously by checking the box right below where you enter your question. We've had a large number of people register for this series. We're thrilled to see the level of interest. It's really great, but please just bear in mind we might not be able to answer all your questions during the session. We do have people standing by to answer all your questions, and we'll do our best to answer as many as we can during the call today. If you visit aka.ms/MCAS Q&A, you'll see a post dedicated to these webinar series and the questions. We'll review this transcript after today's session and we'll post any further answers to that location. If you're listening to the recording after today's session, this is also the place where you can post your questions after the event and get some answers. We are recording today's webinar and this will be shared publicly. We will post the recording on our community at aka.ms/MCAS recordings. Talking of community, if you're not already signed up, do please come and join us. The URL is on the screen. It's aka.ms/security-community. This is the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars. It's also where we post major announcements and a place where you can interact directly with our engineering teams that create our security products. You'll be able to influence our product designs, get early access to changes by doing things like participating in private previews, requesting features, reviewing our roadmap, and attending in-person events and webinars like today. As I mentioned, we have some great content planned. Today is session 5 of a 6-part series on Microsoft Cloud App Security, or MCAS for short. Throughout this series, we're walking you through all the major pillars of functionality and showing you how to deliver and configure each part. So I'd like to introduce you to the team on the call today. Sebastian will be presenting and is one of our resident MCAS experts on the call. He's a program manager in our MCAS team and part of what we call our Get to Production group. This role is focused on helping our customers deploy and configure MCAS, and it's well suited to today's topic. On the call, we also have Gershon, Niv, Boris, Dima, and Danny to help answer your questions. So with the housekeeping covered, I'll pass to Sebastian. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam, and welcome everybody to this 4th webinar in our series. So today we're going to discuss about the third-party application integration with MCAS, but before going there, I just want to show the slides that you've probably already seen if you were in the previous session, and today we're going to focus on sanctioned application. If you remember our previous session, we've been talking about first discovering applications that are in use within your organization with the discovery capabilities provided by Cloud App Security. And during that session, we recommended that when you've identified the application that you could govern, to decide to integrate them with your infrastructure by, for example, either using our API connector or Azure AD integration. And this is definitely how we're going to work with sanctioned application. So for people that do not know what unsanctioned means, it will mean that your unsanctioned application or application not managed by your IT infrastructure, and sanctioned application are managed applications. You always think about MCAS and Office 365 integration when you discuss about Microsoft CASB, but we actually support much more than Office 365. That's why you have here some of the applications that we support that are part of our featured application here. And we'll discuss the different way of integrating those applications with Cloud App Security. So really important, if you're using more than Office 365, Cloud App Security is definitely a good solution for you to integrate those applications with. So let's look at how we can connect further the third-party application to Cloud App Security. The first way we're going to discuss is the API connectors. So API connectors are connector that we built in the Cloud App Security solution, and that lets you get all visibility on all the activities that are performed within those SaaS applications, and do advanced things like, for example, scanning the content of those applications and applying some classification and protection. Another way to integrate those third-party applications can be also using conditional access app control. So this is a reverse proxy technology that lets you integrate those applications with Cloud App Security if they are already federated with Azure Active Directory or any third-party IDPs, which is currently in preview. We'll also discuss about OAuth application and why you want to monitor those applications, because they have some delegated access to your managed application, like Office 365, Salesforce, Google, etc. And we will then review the current feature, which is still in preview, any app support, that will let you actually onboard yourself any application that will be federated with Azure Active Directory, but also on-premises application through the through the Azure Directory application proxy. Let's have a look at the global architecture of Cloud App Security and how we integrate those applications. So if you look at your Cloud Apps here compared to Cloud App Security, I explain you that we have those apps connector that will connect through the API. So this is a way for us to get visibility on all your user activities without any interaction on the at the user level. So what we're doing here is analyzing all the logs from those cloud applications in nearly real time. So we're able to detect things like user downloading files, sharing files, having maybe failed logon from different IPs. So all those different capabilities will be provided by the application API. So there we really rely on the application API capabilities for us to know exactly what we can monitor. and you have a full list of the supported application in our documentation. The second way to do this with conditional access app control is using our reverse proxy technology. So this reverse proxy, as I said before, is extending the different controls that you can apply to the Azure Active Directory conditional access policies. Conditional access policies, if you're not familiar with this concept, let you define some conditions, like a user connecting from maybe external IP address, connecting from an unmanaged device, this kind of specific condition. And what the conditional access policy is going to do is, based on the condition that you've defined and our machine learning, it will define a risk level for your user connection. Based on the risk level that you will identify there, you can define specific control capabilities, like blocking or granting access to the application. And conditional access app control provides you session control through a reverse proxy to prevent things like download of a file or download of specific sensitive file in real time, or even apply custom protection at download. So that's really a powerful solution that lets you extend the Azure Active Directory conditional access policies use cases. And when you integrate this reverse proxy with your cloud application, it's going to also feed the cloud app security discovery engine with activities to those applications. We also support, in addition to the SaaS application for which we have connectors or conditional app control support, cloud platform. When we talk about cloud platform, we're talking about Azure, but also AWS, and we will rely either on the API provided by those platforms, but also on Azure Security Center that will provide you the right recommendation to improve your security posture. This unique integration really helps you to get all the best practices we want you to implement, like applying some disk encryption in your VMs, or maybe preventing public access through RDP or SSH to your VMs. Our OAuth application is also a solution that we briefly discussed before, and that will provide you this visibility on the application that have access to your applications, like Office 365, Salesforce, or G Suite on this screenshot. What we can do for you here is provide you an assessment on those application permission level, like a high privilege access, like accessing data on behalf of the user, and also applying some control, like authorizing some application or revoking access from those applications. We'll look in details how it works and how you can investigate on those specific applications during the demo. The any app support or on-premises app support that we just discussed before is something that we're going to demo here. And this is a feature which is still in preview. What we're going to do here to apply these specific capabilities to your application is to extend the scenario, as I discussed, for Azure AD conditional access policies, redirect your user to cloud app security, and then let yourself onboard those applications that you want to use with session control in cloud app security. I will explain all those details here, but basically how you onboard an application is by defining the custom domains that will be used, and you will be able to apply then full session control, just like what we do with the feature app support. And let's move to the demo. If you're not familiar yet with Cloud App Security, this is the portal that we're going to use here. And to be able to connect an application using our API connectors to get full visibility on those applications, you have to go to our settings. And here you have the app connector. As you can see here, app connectors are a way to connect to my application. And you see that in my environment, I already have Office 365, Azure, Salesforce, and a Box instance connected, in addition to other applications. And if you want to add an extra application, you just have to click on the plus button and select the application you want to add. You can see that here I can add Box while it's already connected here. The reason is that many organizations have multiple instances of those cloud applications. So if you want to get full visibility on all the instances used by your user, you should definitely come here and provide access to those different apps. I'm going to add here that specific new instance just to show you how simple it is to integrate third-party application with Cloud App Security. And I'm going to call this instance Box Webinar. I have to connect Box, and you see here that I just have to follow the link here to provide access to Cloud App Security. I have to provide my credential here to authenticate to Box and grant access to Cloud App Security. And you see that I have here to click Authorize. When I click Authorize, what's going to happen is that I'm going to provide Cloud App Security access to all my file and folder in Box, being able to look at the groups and all the different configuration steps I have here, and look also at the application that my user will be using and all of their activities. After clicking Access to Box, this is going to create an access an access token here for Cloud App Security, and you can see that now it's going to start to scan for user data and activities within Box. This is as simple as what I just showed here for connecting an application. Depending on the application, of course, the steps will be different and the permissions that are required are different. I will redirect you to our documentation to see how you can integrate a specific application. You can see here that I have now different instances for my Box. Another way to integrate your application, as I told you, is using Conditional Access App Control. To configure Conditional Access App Control, the first thing I'll have to do is to first go to Azure and start by using a Conditional Access Policy. So now that I'm in my Azure portal, I have to go to Azure Active Directory. And in Azure Active Directory, you can scroll down to the Conditional Access section. Here you can see that I already have some specific policies that are created, but to start using this feature for demo, I'm going to create a new policy called Demo Webinar. When you're defining those policies, usually we will recommend you to select a specific user to which you want to apply this policy instead of applying this to all the users you have in your organization. And you can see that you can also apply those controls to your guest user. Here in my case, I'm going to select a specific user in my environment. I'm going to apply this policy to this specific user. You have then to define the cloud application to which you want to apply this control. And I can select, for example, in my environment, one of the applications which is federated with my Azure Active Directory. Let's say Box in this case. Done. You can define some condition as usual, like maybe a specific risk for your user. That's a signal coming from Azure Active Directory, defining which device platform you want to use, maybe specific location or specific device state. I'm going to select everything. And here you're going to grant access, but what we're going to do is to redirect the user session to Cloud App Security. This is done by clicking here on Use Conditional Access App Control. You see that we now provide built-in capabilities to let you monitor only the traffic, block download, or use custom policies. For the demos here, I'm going to use custom policies. And when you use custom policies, you have to go to Cloud App Security to go further to monitor this. I'm going to select this feature and enable my policy. When you've created your conditional access policies in Azure AD, you have then to go to Cloud App Security and work with your application to onboard them. So for application like Box in this case, what you will see is that some application here it's already onboarded, but you will have to first log into the application to have the application appearing here in this list. When you have an application connected using conditional access app control, you will notice that you have here some Azure AD conditional access configured, and you can have session control to apply some specific control on your session, like blocking file download, applying classification, preventing copy paste from the file content, and more. You can see that in my environment, I have some application like this one that I will discuss later that would require me to request session control. This is the current situation for most of your tenants. And this is what we're going to demo after to let you onboard yourself your application. So let's move to a demo to understand how we can use now the application that we have onboarded. What we have to do is to first create a new policy in Cloud App Security, in addition to the one we created in Azure AD. And when you create a policy for the reverse proxy, so conditional access app control, you can either create an access policy. So an access policy is the place where you're going to define that you want to allow or block access to your application. So you see that this is a control that you can apply to all the applications that do not support session control. And you see that this is still limited as a control that we can apply. You can define some condition like the device to which you want to apply. And if you're wondering why we can also filter device state in Cloud App Security compared to what we already have in Azure AD, here is the answer. We can use client certificate to identify your trusted computers, like the ones that would be either managed by third-party MDMs or that you could identify with your internal PKI. Like your Mac computers, for example, or your partners using certificate to identify themselves. The second type of policy we have for conditional access app control is the session policy. And session policy here would be, for example, demo webinar protect or node. And this is a policy on which I can apply different type of control in the session, monitor, block activities. So in the block activities, you could select which specific activity you would like to control in your application. So you see that here we have different activities specific to the application that was onboarded. Like in this case for Box, we can, or Salesforce, we can prevent sharing items. Or compared to this one, we have the control file download or upload DLP policies. And what you could do here is scope this to Box, just like what I did in my Azure AD policy. And then you can apply some inspection control for the files that you want to protect or block. You see that here in data classification, I can choose, just like in my file policies, specific sensitivity data type that I want to control. So let's select those ones for our demos. And what you can do is then either block the download of your files or maybe apply a protection like a view-only template here using Azure Information Protection. When you've created this kind of policy, you'll be able to then control in real-time access to your application. Before showing you the demo or the user experience, what I want to do is also show you the specific controls that we are now allowing you to have for the any app support. So in any app support, we're talking about any application that will be federated with your Azure Active Directory, but also application that will be proxied by Azure AD Application Proxy. How does it work? Again, we need to go first to Azure Active Directory. And when you go to your Azure Active Directory, you can go to your application proxy, you have to install a connector on premises. So in my environment, you can see that I have an on-premises server called WinSRV1 that's going to be used to proxy my on-premises application that I want to protect with Cloud App Security. The next thing you have to do then is to go to Enterprise Application and publish your application. In my case, I already have here a finance internal site. So this is an internal SharePoint on the on-premises server that's going to be accessible. To have this feature working, the first thing you have to do is to enable single sign-on. That's going to be required. And you can see here that this is already configured for my application. If you don't know how to do this, I will redirect you to the Azure AD application proxy configuration. You can see here that I'm going to use this specific server that's providing my on-premises application, and I'm going to use the user principal name to authenticate. When you have onboarded your application here in Azure AD, the next thing that you have to do is to configure a conditional access policy. And you can see that here, I already have created a conditional access policies for on-premises application reverse proxy. Let's have a look at what we have here. So I have, just like the application I showed you before, a specific user that will be protected. In this case, I have Adil and Megan. You see that my application is the finance internal site application I just shown you. And for the control that I'm applying on this application, I'm using session control and I'm monitoring the access by redirecting to Cloud App Security. That will be the first step for you to onboard your on-premises application with Cloud App Security. When you have configured this specific policy in Azure AD, what you have to do is then log in to this application with a test user for which you configure the conditional access policies, and that user will have the application available in the My Apps portal. When you click on this specific application that you've published here, you can see that you're redirected to Cloud App Security, and you see that here this application needs to be onboarded to have session control. This is something that you will not see in your tenant because we're still in preview currently, but how can you configure yourself that specific feature? You have to first have a test policy. You will have to configure the application in Cloud App Security portal. So this is that specific portal we're talking about here. When you go to your setting and conditional access app control, you see that I have here my finance on-premises application available. So it appears once you have traffic being redirected through Cloud App Security to access this application. And you see that here, I don't have yet session control. I'm not going to request session control. I'm going to self-onboard this application. So when you go to this specific page, you see that in the experience at the beginning, when you start onboarding an application, we will provide you a self-signed certificate that you can use to test your application. This is only temporary when you are onboarding that application. And what we're going to do on the backend when you have onboarded your application is to generate a new public certificate that should be available 4 hours after onboarding that application. And when you've done this, you will be able then to continue to onboard the application. Currently, if I try to go to continue to finance on premises, it's going to fail. So I'm going to close this screen and show you the next experience for the onboarding. When you've defined that you want to onboard this application, you can see that we're going to have now in the edit application setting new capabilities. To onboard by yourself the application, you will have to define the user-defined domain for your application. In this case, I'm using the external URL provided by Azure AD application proxy. So our reverse proxy knows how to rewrite all the URLs that will be used by this application. And to finalize the onboarding, you have to define that you want to use conditional access app control. After clicking that checkbox and saving the result, what we're going to do is to then apply the configuration and the backend to let you have session control for any application federated with Azure AD, but also on-premises application like this one. So if I look now at my finance on-premises application, you see here that session control is available. This is something that was not possible before. Now that I have onboarded my application, what can I do? If you remember, in Azure Active Directory, we first created a monitor-only policy. What I want to do now to validate that my session control is working as expected, I want to apply a block download capability. So I'm not going to apply custom AIP policies here. What I'm going to do is just prevent download from my on-premises application. I select this setting and save my policy. And to validate that the onboarding was successful, I will go back to my other user using the My Apps icon here. So now if I click on my finance internal site, I'm redirected to Cloud App Security. And you see that here, I don't have the onboarding message anymore, but I have the classic message telling me that my finance on-premises application is monitored. If I click to continue to the finance on-premises application, you see that I'm now accessing my on-premises SharePoint. So this is a physical server in my basement. And you see that here, I'm really passing through Cloud App Security because of the URL rewriting here. To validate that everything is working as expected, we encourage you to review all the different settings that you can configure on all the different pages that you can access within the application. And for example, here I'm going to validate that the block download is working as expected. And I will try to download the file. And here you can see that the download was blocked. So this allows me to confirm that I have now successfully onboarded my on-premises application. This is the exact procedure that you will use for any application that you would like to onboard by yourself. Something that we're also going to provide with that self-onboarding experience is the admin view. You see here that on my page, I have this message at the bottom, letting me contacting directly the Cloud App Security teams if I have some issues with that application. The issues that you could identify could either be a regular error message, maybe some images that will not show properly, or maybe some HTML errors. Slow performance is also something that you can report, and you could explain us what's happening exactly. And then this specific message here will directly go to the engineering teams that will go back to you to help you resolve those specific issues for your own application that you have onboarded. This is the self-service application onboarding for any application federated with Azure AD or any on-premises application proxies through Azure AD. Let's go back to my other demos here. So the last one that I have to show you, we're talking about OAuth application. So OAuth application is a feature that when we discuss with customer is most of the time poorly used or not even understood. So when you go to that specific page here, you will have visibility on all the applications that have actually access to your environment. Those applications have a delegated access to your user data because they just granted that access. And what we provide you here is information about all those applications, the user that authorized those applications to access data on their behalf, the permission level that the application have on your environment, and the last time this was authorized. If I look at some application I have here in my environment, maybe it's the first thing I want to look when investigating on those applications is to look for application having a high severity permission level. You can see that in my environment, I have many applications here that have this kind of permission. Some applications are perfectly fine, like the iOS account here. I can verify that this is actually the Apple iOS account. So this is something I will accept. And you can see that we define the permission level as high because that specific application, the iOS account, can access the mailbox of the user and sign in and read the user profile. But for this application here, it's fine. So what I'm going to do here is flag the application as an approved application. If I look at other applications that I have in my environment, you can see here that I have an application called Zapier, which is already revoked. So this is something that I've already applied before, but this application here is an application that works a bit like Microsoft Flow. So this is an application using some automation capabilities to access your data and possibly exfiltrate that data to other applications. If you look at the permission that this application have, you see that here this application can access any of your data anytime, read and write files inside collection, so potentially copying every file from your organization and signing as the user. How could you automate the process that I've been showing here? This is something that you can do by using new policies. So if I click on a new policy, I'm going to create a demo webinar policy here. You can define the low severity and category. I'm going to stick with threat detection. You can select the application to which you want to apply this policy. I will use here in this case Salesforce. And the filter that I want to use is to look first for the sorry, not application, but to look at the community use. And I'm going to search for files that are pretty rare. So this is a way for us to look at all the Microsoft tenants, and we look at that community use of those applications. So if we identify that an application is not commonly used across all the tenants that we protect, we're going to alert you. If we look at the other possibility, you see that we can send an alert for each matching policies here. And in the governance section that we provide, we can either define notify the user. So we could tell the user that this is an application that we consider as risky because this is not commonly used across all the Microsoft tenants. Or maybe you want to automatically revoke your application. I'm going to stick with notify the user here instead of revoking the application. And what you're going to do here is automatically apply this protection for your Salesforce environment. My slide here. This was the last part of my demo. So this is the right time for me to take any question you would have. I don't know if Adam, you have a question on what we just showed today.
Thanks, Sebastian. I'm just having a quick skim through the list. As usual, the team have been very good in providing fairly comprehensive answers. While I'm doing this, if anyone on the Microsoft team has a point they think we should expand on, please feel free to jump in. I will take that as a no.
Okay, perfect. Yes, I'm checking also the question. I see that all those applications have been, all those questions have been answered apparently.
Yes. Yeah. Look, I think we've we've covered off things fairly comprehensively. If there's anything else you want to add, that'd be great. Otherwise, I can look at closing things off.
Okay, perfect. So in any case, if you have more questions, please come to the community where you will be able to ask anything and one of our experts will answer you. If you don't have any other question, I will just thank you for joining and ask you to join the last webinar that we'll have next week regarding some automation capabilities with Flow.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Sebastian. So, and thank you everyone for attending today, as Sebastian just touched on. If for some reason you don't have the rest of the series, as we mentioned, there's one more left next week. You can find that on the URL on the slide, aka.ms/MCAS webinar. You can find the recordings at aka.ms/MCAS recordings. And if you haven't already, please do come and join us at aka.ms/security community. Thank you for joining us today. Thanks for being part of our community. We hope to see you all again next week. We also have an AIP series running on Tuesday, so feel free to check that out as well. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.